conservatives and across Texas that there are a variety of viewpoints on this matter. Let's dive right in and learn some facts and get some questions answered, find out what the impacts could be, and what would happen in our state if this does pass or doesn't pass. I'd like to welcome from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Dr. Richard Johnson, and Mary Lowe from Families Engaged for this discussion, and our moderator.
All right, you guys, thank you for being here. If you both just want to have a seat, I just want to tell you, are we ready with the live stream? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was all going.
We're not live streaming.
We're not live streaming, we're just recording. Okay, that's fine too, so people can watch it later. But I just wanted to kind of preface what we're doing tonight. First of all, we are recording it because we know people all over the state are interested. And yes, I know that our Katy location is one of our smaller locations, so we're glad you can be here in the audience to observe firsthand what we talk about. But we are doing these right versus right forums all over the state on different topics because there are things that those of us that consider ourselves on the right don't agree on. And historically, True Texas Project has kind of avoided those topics because why do we want to start fights among our own people when we can focus on other things where we agree and accomplish a lot more? So we decided to start these conversations, but my number one rule, and I will tell both of you, my number one rule is this is a friendly conversation. What I want you to do is gain some knowledge on both sides and be able to present your own opinion in an intelligent way when you have conversations outside of this group, okay? You guys understand that?
Yes.
Because if it gets contentious, I'm gonna cut you off.
I can't imagine
Okay.
that either one of us.
Okay, awesome, that's perfect. So, I'm just gonna sit off here to the side and I'm gonna ask you some questions. We have a timekeeper. Who's keeping time for us? Somebody with a phone?
I can.
Can you please?
What's
Okay.
our limit?
I will tell you with each question what they get, and there's not a lot, so. Okay, so first of all, we are gonna start with you, Richard. If you would please just take 2 minutes to briefly give your background and a rough overview of your stance.
Usually I always start with ladies first, but I'm an old Army sergeant, so I don't normally jump out in front of women. But
This lady started and asked me to start.
okay, I'm Richard Johnson. I'm a native Houstonian. I was born in Houston, Texas, and I earned a bachelor's degree in history and government from Wiley College, a master's degree in clinical psychology, and a doctorate degree in education from Texas Southern University. Served 8 years in the United States Army as an Army sergeant. Came back home and I opened up a drug treatment facility, a 51-bed drug treatment facility for inner city boys during that time. That was in the late 80s. And then I went on to become the president of Louisiana Prison Chapel Foundation, where we built 21 churches inside of prisons throughout the state of Louisiana. So I am a strong Christian conservative, and I tell you, and I put that emphasis on that adjective, strong Christian conservative. And most of my ideas, thoughts, views, and values, most people would call them extremely right, because I believe in life. God gives us the right to choose, which us to choose life. I believe in serving your country, of course. I served in the Army. My father was in the Army, and my grandfather was in the Army, World War I and Korean War. And when it comes down to freedom, I believe in freedom. Just like the slogan here says, freedom at all costs. I believe in freedom at all costs. I mean, that's the reason why I raised my right hand and joined the military, to fight for freedom. And I come from a long history of that. So when we talk about educational freedom, I don't think freedom stops at education. I think that we as parents ought to have the right and ability to make the best possible educational choices for our own children. And I believe that our tax dollars, because I am a taxpayer, I believe our tax dollars ought to follow the child. I believe in funding children and not institutions. So that's why I'm out on the trail, and I've been making about 7 to 9 speaking engagements a month going across the state of Texas, advocating for freedom. I advocate for freedom, I live for freedom, and I'm a true Texan, born and raised.
Love it. Okay. Mary, same thing. 2 minutes. She'll have 2 minutes to tell about herself and just a rough idea of your stance.
So I'm going to allocate my time a little more heavily on my stance. My name is Mary Lowe, and if you would like to know my work background and my history, you can find it on LinkedIn or on the website of familiesengaged.org. I am a parent, and I am a native Texan. I was an entrepreneur and a business owner, and spent 10 years working to eradicate biblical illiteracy, and I came from a family of educators. My father was the only member of our family who was not an educator, and back then I had quite a few aunts and uncles, so a lot of educators and lots of education in my life, and I was called into this because of what was happening in our communities, that parents were seeing the failure of the education system through being able to take a look behind the education curtain during COVID. My position on this is that parent empowerment cannot ever be given to you by the government, and that it is a false narrative to conflate that a school choice, is the same as empowering a parent. My parents had authority to parent because they were parents, and it certainly didn't cost them or taxpayers $2.44 billion to obtain their authority as a parent. I would say the young woman who was in the video that spoke about the laws around our elections really reflected a lot of exactly what I see and what I hear and what I feel, is that there's a lack of transparency, and that there's no accountability, and that there's no consequence when things are not followed, when guidelines, policies, laws, rules are not followed. And basically what I heard her say was, the problem is our government, and what I'm here to tell you is that I'm against this because the problem is our government.
Thank you. The problem's always the government. Okay.
Never the parent.
Yeah. Richard, if you would please, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes now. If you'll give us 10 minutes of your stance on school choice.
Well, I'll tell you a story.
If you'll hold that a little closer.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. When I got out of the Army, I came back to Houston and started working in the school system. I'm an educator by trade. I've been an educator for 30 years. My doctorate degree is in education. But I was born and raised in 5th Ward in Pleasantville, which is the inner city of Houston, where the school system, the public school system, had changed drastically from the time that I came up in the 60s and the early 70s. And so much so, when I came back home, I got married, and my wife and I had a couple kids. And I couldn't send my kids to the same school that I went to. So my wife came home one day and she said, "Richard, I read an article that said that if we send our kids to a Christian-based school, private school, they would get a better foundation in math, reading, and science, as well as strong moral support and development, pre-K through 6th grade." Well, I wasn't Dr. Johnson at that time, so I wasn't making a lot of money, but we were paying high taxes staying out in Spring. And I said to her, well, look, you went to public school, I went to public school, we turned out all right. I mean, I was a strong advocate. And she said, "Richard, I read an article that states that if we send our kids to a private Christian-based school, they're going to get a better start and a better foundation." I said, "Well, I haven't even seen that article." So she pulled the article out and showed it to me. And I looked at the article and I said, "See, here's our problem right here." She said, "What's that?" I say, that says St. Mary's. That's Catholic. We're Baptist. You know, how can we send our kids, how can our kids turn out better there? And she said, Richard, I said, besides that, we're paying these high taxes over here. And if we take our kid out of here and put them over there, we're gonna have to pay high taxes over here, and we're gonna have to pay tuition over there. She said, Richard, all the research says that if we send our kids to this school, to a private Christian-based school, they're gonna get a better foundation. Let me tell you guys something. I said, well, look, how are we gonna pay for it? She said, you're gonna get another job. I said, I already got one job and I'm trying to go through school. She said, no, you're gonna get a job on top of that job. Best argument I ever lost. I didn't win that argument. Best argument I ever lost. Because I had to work 2 jobs while I was going to school and a veteran coming out of the military, adjusting. But my kids really did get a strong foundation in math, reading, and science, the basics. And then those kids turned out to be the nicest kids in the world in terms of their moral development. And one day I test my kids. I'm an old Army sergeant, so I test, hey, Richard, come over here. I want you to do something. Read this to me. And my son just started reading it off perfectly. I say, oh man, Jesus Christ. And then my wife comes, she says, we're gonna go to Simone's recital. I said, well, she's gonna be reciting some poems or something? I mean, I was going to Fifth Ward. She said, no, she's playing the violin. I said, I got a kid playing the violin. So I became a convert at that point. I started fighting because at that point, I gotta be honest with you guys, it was really hard. We struggled. I wish that maybe 10% of my tax dollars that I was paying over there would help me pay for a choice of my own. But I didn't have that. And so from that moment on, I started fighting for parents to have the freedom to send their kids. Those were the best options. My wife was right. I was fighting for the wrong thing, but I learned from her that this choice works. And that was my son now is 26, that was 22 years ago. And it wasn't until about maybe 5 or 6 years ago I ran into a group of other people who were fighting for the same freedom that I was fighting for. I was a lone voice in the inner city of Houston. But when I ran into TPPF, Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we started talking about this, and I was like, man, dude, we're on the same team. But they had a bigger team. They had a much bigger team. And so it became a natural fit for me because this is the fight that I've been fighting for over 2 decades, and that is for every parent, because I really want parents now, my kids are grown, but I really want parents now to have an opportunity to make that choice for their children, and their own tax dollars can follow their kid to help them out. And that's true freedom, I believe.
Okay, Mary?
Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, I would just like to dispel a misconception about charter schools, private schools, and public schools, and that a charter school is always a better performer academically than a public school. And I would also like to dispel that the private school is always a better performer or their students achieve at a higher level than the public school. The common denominator for poor academic performance for students or poor outcomes for students happens to align with the socioeconomics of which they live and how they exist, which is certainly consistent with what Dr. Johnson just shared with you. The other thing is parents who have skin in the game and who have some investment in what their children are doing, as Dr. Johnson did, those children tend to do better no matter where they are. So I would like to point to that the real issue for the failure is the family unit. And then the next thing that I would like to dispel is that the government education school they're providing is without a doubt in a state of crisis. Even in the highest income areas, there are elements of crisis. And I formed an organization, and we have traveled across the state of Texas, but we advocate for parents in the public school system and sometimes in charter schools. One of the major differences when we advocate for parents in a charter school versus the public school is that we cannot have any input or any say in the charter school because there is no representation. It is actually taxation without representation. And those schools have the right to kick you out or not let you in, which the private schools all have the same thing. So they can skew the data and the outcome because they cherry pick and cherry pick who attends. And if you're not happy with what is happening at the school, for example, I had a parent who didn't like the lesson that was being taught about a racial incident where a police officer killed a man. And they complained to the school and felt that it was just age inappropriate. Not that they were opposed to the lesson, but that they didn't want their kindergartner learning about murder. And so there was no place for me to go. But in the public school, I have recourse because we have processes in place for that. So the next thing I want to talk about are the bills that have been put forth by the state. And I would also add at this time that Texas Public Policy Foundation has a very front row seat at the table of the bills that are put forth by our government body and by our legislators. There has yet to be a bill put forth that does not have strings attached and that is truly reaching those lower socioeconomic students. Currently, Senate Bill 1 is in place, and it says it's going to meet the needs of special ed students. That the first 40% of the lottery would go to special ed and low income. So what it doesn't tell you is that they don't have transportation to get to a school, and there's not a school where they can go. And if your lottery is just for a special ed student, you know, there's only 2 private schools, and it's only for private schools. There's only 2 private schools in the state of Texas that take Down syndrome children. 2 that are not state schools, private schools. So I want you to think about that. 40% of the lottery is low income and special ed. Well, there's no school to really take them. So when those slots of the lottery aren't taken up by somebody, where's it going to go? It's going to fall out and overflow to people who really have the means to pay for it themselves, because then it's going to open up to everyone. So out of the mouth of TPPF themselves, this is just a tax break for the wealthy. It does not do anything. It also grows government. I'm opposed to this because they're putting this under the comptroller's office, and I think at some point somebody should really explore how much has been added to the comptroller's office recently. It's becoming an agency of itself. Now, we're grateful that they didn't put it under the Texas Education Agency because there's no transparency. We don't know where any of the money is going there. And so we're grateful it's not there, and it's certainly very much a failed agency. But why are we putting this under the comptroller's agency? Oh, because it's a banking scheme. It is. 5% of the funds are going to go to 5 different vendors that will administer this bank account that's called an education savings account. So I'm opposed to that. The other thing is, this isn't coming out of the permanent school fund because the law says it can't. So they're taking it out of the general fund. How many of you in here have Robin Hood, that you're a recapture district? So that was the first redistribution of wealth that we had in our state in education, and that was 25 years ago, and it failed. The redistribution of funds, of tax dollars to help education was Robin Hood, and it has not moved the needle one bit. It has only gotten worse. So why do we now think that once again reallocating wealth to a different population, and this time doing it in a different way where the money follows the student, however, it's on a string attached to the government, and it's on a string attached to a testing mechanism, which makes that school then a government school. So I would tell you that I'm very much against that. Also, it's going to grow, 3% is going to get paid to the comptroller's office. So you are going to pay additional funding. This is growing the government. It is creating a whole nother lane of government. A whole nother lane of education for you to fund. This is not going to be free. If the government wanted to make the money follow the child, and it was really going to be freedom, that money would never leave your pocket.
Right.
So I am totally opposed to this. I am not opposed to choice. I am not opposed to parents having power, authority to parent. I am opposed to the fact that our Republican-controlled government have written the laws that have destroyed our education system with one goal in mind: to privatize education. The largest amount of money that we spend in Texas is on education. And if the crony friends of our elected elite can bundle more money to their friends, they can make more money. If you've studied Planned Parenthood and what Planned Parenthood was to the Democrats, it was a mechanism to capture taxpayer money through Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance. And then Planned Parenthood donated $42 million a year back to the Democrat Party. I see this as the same thing, and there's no transparency. In the bill, it says that the comptroller's office can accept grants and donations. You don't have access to who those grants and those donations are coming from. And if you can't see red flags and understand that your government is looking to hide how they spend their money even more deeply from you under the guise of a solution to fixing what they broke, then you're not looking. What we need to do is demand that they fix the one education system that the children will be stuck in, under everybody's estimation, with a voucher or an education savings account, which the only thing is different is that an ESA, education savings account, polled really well with people, and voucher, the word does not. Voucher is a piece of paper. An education savings account is digital. I just want you to close your eyes for a minute and think about digital currency and the Great Reset. It's on its way. And how are they going to do it? With your children. With an education savings account, it's going to be on something called Class Wallet. It's already in our schools. It's digital. They're going to control all the information. They're just going to put a little backpack on this child. I don't care that it's in a private school. They're going to control it. They're going to have the data. Is that really what you want? I mean, I just don't think it is. And the transparency is not going to be there. But it is going to be your money. It is going to be your taxes. And you cannot have a tax break. They were talking about tax break. We want tax breaks. We're going to give you a tax break. If you're increasing the spending, you're not getting a tax break. And if you're replicating the current education system that's right here, over here, you're going to have the same thing. By everybody's estimation, the amount of children that will be left in the system is greater than 86%. So why would you do it?
Okay, thank you, Mary. At this point, we're going to give you 5 minutes to kind of refute and talk about what she's just said.
Wow, Mary, you sound just like my ultra-Democrat friends in the inner city, man. I mean, this is the same argument that I get from, black Democrats in Fifth Ward. It's the exact same argument. One of the things is, number one, there is not a private school versus public school versus charter school. It's creating additional options for all kids, for kids to go to and parents to take their kids to any one of those schools. Right now, you did say that the education portion of the budget takes up most of the budget, which it does. That's the truth. In the regular session, putting $10 billion more in this session, this special session, was probably gonna put another $4 billion in for teacher pay raises, more public education. But 500 million, less than $1 billion of $332 billion a year budget, total budget. Less than $1 billion to say to parents that you have the freedom. You have the freedom to take your kid, because we're not a income tax state. We're a sales tax state. So even that poor mother who's in 77029, zip code 77029, even her, some of her tax dollars go toward that big education bucket. But she can't take her kid out of there. She can't take her kid out of 77029 because she doesn't make enough money. I'm talking about the inner city of 5th Ward. She can't take her kid out of there. And public schools are what we call chronically failing. They've been on the failing list, some of them 14, 15 years consecutively. And you know what we call that? School to prison pipeline. Because we look at TDCJ, and I've done the research. I've looked at TDCJ, and I've looked at the individuals in their zip codes, and I traced those zip codes back, those inmates back to where they came from. They came out of those zip codes with those chronically failing public schools. Only thing we're saying is give every Texan the opportunity for freedom to move their child. We have school choice right now. We really do, if you can afford it. But what about that mother who can't? You know how much it cost me to send my kids to St. Mary's? $10,000 a year apiece, St. Mary's. And then to the Methodist school, the Methodist Christian school was $9,000 a year. What if I had an education savings account? Because everybody's not gonna be Dr. Johnson, because I wasn't always Dr. Johnson. What if I had an education savings account when me and my wife were trying to make it? But we wanted the best for our kids just like everybody else. I don't know anybody, you may love kids. If I asked everybody in here to raise your hand if you love children, everybody raise your hand. But you can't outlove me with mine like I can't outlove you with yours. If someone stood at that door right now, and me and my 4 kids was in here, and they said, one of y'all gotta step out this door and die, I'd walk out of that door. My kids would stay in here, I'd give my life for them. So if it means me having to work a little bit harder, admit that. If it means for me having to get transportation, I'll get it. Because no matter how poor you are, and I come from a poor neighborhood, no matter how poor you are, you're a Texan, and you deserve that right for freedom. And it's not a matter of private school versus public school. There are some great public schools that are doing great jobs. But there are some public schools that are not doing such a good job. And those are the neighborhoods that I came from. So when we talk about freedom, I'm a strong Christian, disciplined conservative. I don't give a Democrat mantra. I fight this battle in the 5th Ward, I fight this battle among black Democrats a lot. Because you know why? They're against education savings accounts. Because they're being supported by the teachers union. So they're against education savings accounts. And they're like, man, you supporting something that Republicans are supporting. No, man, I'm supporting freedom. This is the new civil rights movement of our time.
Thank you. 5 minutes, Mary.
So I just want to counter that. Children are not Republican or Democrat, and all children, regardless of race or socioeconomics, should have a high quality opportunity for a safe education. And I think one of the things that we're not talking about here is the safety. And I would tell you, if I was pushed and said you have to do something that is to take away from the public school system, I would say then you need to give every parent the right to educate their child at home, because then you know your child is safe. And if they're not safe, then it's the parent's responsibility. Because what we have today in our school system is that parents don't know that their child is safe. If we as a country cannot create a place for our children to go that's safe in one area, then we can't in another. And so I think that's a real issue that is not being addressed here. And then I think the other thing that's not being addressed here is the cost. Is that already with the looming anticipation of an ESA or a voucher being passed, most of your private schools, and again, the bill that's on the books right now is only for private schools. The homeschoolers don't want it because they don't want the government strings. But it's $8,000, and already those private schools are going up in their tuition because they already have who they want, and they're fine, they're gonna get $8,000 and we can just charge more because they're still gonna pay for it because they're already here and they're invested and they're willing to make that sacrifice. So the voucher is gonna make the cost of private school go up. And then the private schools that aren't highly regarded, they're gonna be happy to take the $8,000. And some of your charter schools are gonna ask to be converted to private schools because they can make more money. So that's the $8,000, but you're talking about your Democrat. Well, two of the Democrat representatives who are currently in the 5th Ward, one of them is a teacher, Alma Allen, and she doesn't want it, and she explained it very clearly. There's a video out there of her testimony from the dais that children are not gonna have the ability to get to the school. There's no bus. Not only that, there's no, not that I'm a Friday Night Lights fan, but there's no football, there's no sports. There's not the community, and those children need the community as much as they need the education. They really do. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the teachers. So you're going to take all of the teachers out of, because you're going to collapse the public education system. And you're going to take those teachers out, and they're going to now go to private schools, because we're going to grow the private sector. And we have teacher retirement, and we have teachers who are taking retirement right now. And it survives that retirement that the state has guaranteed for them, because they did not take Social Security out for those teachers. They paid into retirement. So that fund is only funded by the current teachers. The current teachers, the money comes out, and it's how you fund the retirement of the teachers who are retired. When you take all those teachers out of the public school system, do you know who's going to have to pick up that retirement? Taxpayer. This is a banking scheme and a tax hike coming your way, and it does not solve one educational problem. And I'm just telling you that the best thing you can do is call your representative and tell them, take their fraud someplace else, cut it out. The reason we don't have a pipeline anymore to prison, because our schools have passed a bill, the legislators passed a bill that we have positive behavioral intervention, and we don't report any negative thing. There's no child that is reported to the police anymore. We have police officers on campus, and those are not referred out. So that doesn't exist anymore. There's no pipeline to prison from our schools, but what there is chaos in our schools because of that, because there's no consequence. So I'm just saying, if you think you want this voucher, then you need to realize that your taxes are going to be sky high in less than 5 years. And there's not going to be a public school. The public schools right now in the wealthiest of districts are screaming because they don't have enough funds to meet all of the unfunded mandates coming out of Austin. They don't have the money to put one-to-one computers and renew them every 3 years. The state is breaking your local community, and they are taking away your local community's right to self-govern. And if you want a constitutional republic, say no now.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect, right on time. So we're gonna actually spend the bulk of the rest of the time on audience Q&A. But before we do that, I feel like this has been, I haven't gotten enough information myself. about what's going on. So I would like you, Richard, to address the financial side. Like she's talked about where it's coming from, and it's gonna raise our taxes, and the teachers are all gonna leave, and yet no one's gonna go to these schools, so why would the teachers leave? So I'm a little confused. I just want you to have a chance to speak to the financial side, because I've heard her financial side, and I wanna hear both.
Well, from a finance perspective, like I shared with you, it's only like $500 million, and which will cover about, this bill will cover about 60,000 students, less than 1%. School choice has been around for the last 30 years. And right now, if you look, and it's in 32 other states, they've never gone above 5% leaving public schools. So folks are not gonna flee and leave and go bust open private schools. The other side of that is, one of the things that choice does, it kind of acts like the free market a little bit. It creates competition. You know, we do still have the school prison pipeline. We have chronically failing schools. I come out of HISD, and that's the reason why HISD has been taken over, because of chronically failing schools. And we can trace back, matter of fact, we can trace back a couple of those school to prison pipelines to Alma Allen's district. And that's my biggest argument with her, is because those folks are being locked into the Sunnyside area, and they rush them right into those schools, and they go straight to prison. High dropout rates, low performance rates. Now, I want to say one other thing. If you look at the NAEP score, the NAEP data, National Association for Academic Performance, that's the nation's report card. If you look at the last report card we got from NAEP, there was only one group of providers for education that did not suffer learning loss due to COVID. That was the religious-based schools. Matter of fact, in reading, they went up a point and they remained steady in math. They didn't lose any points. They lost no learning. But if you go back 20 years consecutively, those religious or faith-based private schools outperform public schools in math, reading, and science. The dollars are going to stay the same. There's about $8,000. You want to talk about the money? Dollars about $8,000. Right now in public schools average about $14,000. About $14,000 in public schools. What the ESA would be is about $8,000 that, leaving the M&O back with the public schools. So basically, the public school will still get the M&O if a child decides to leave, and the $8,000 will come over here out of the $14,000. So the public schools actually will end up with more money per pupil than it did before the ESAs. We're not talking about new tax dollars. We're talking about existing tax dollars. This is money you're already paying. But here's the thing. This argument, remember now, there are 32 other states already passed. Number one, in terms of school performance right now, is Arizona. And then after Arizona, you have Florida. And they have the most robust, what we call school choice programs in the nation. But their kids are outperforming. But they're looking out for every kid in their state. Not just some kids who are in some public schools that are in affluent areas that are doing well. But what about those kids that are in public schools that are in your poor areas that are not doing well? They're looking at raising the floor. One of the things that the governor says, he wants to make Texas #1 in education. And I think that's a goal that we should all be after, because if we make Texas #1 in education and become the freest state in America and the world to live in, then the rest of the world will be just fine.
Okay, that's a little unfair to give you that extra time, so I'm gonna give you.
So I just want to address the tax here. So M&O is your local tax dollar, and your school district is entitled to that. In this past year, the legislature compressed the M&O, and they've also put a cap on it. So your school districts cannot increase more than 2%. And then you have Robin Hood. So they're already taking money out of your districts, And with that compression, it does hurt your school district. And what he said, that M&O, they don't lose their M&O for that student, but they never would have lost the M&O. What they lose is weighted average daily attendance. And the weighted average daily attendance is where they really, the M&O can only be used for your capital improvements. It's not what pays your teachers. It's not how you get your teacher allotments. In a lot of the small school districts, let's say you have an elementary school in the rural area where there's 500 students. So when that school district loses one student and they go down to $499, they just lost allotment of $150,000 for a vice principal. $150,000. So if they're gonna keep that vice principal, the $499, no longer $500, they're gonna have to increase your taxes. So I take great umbrage. The other thing I would say is education finance is very confusing, and it's done that way on purpose. It's very, very confusing, and very few members of even school boards really understand. One of the things that we're doing is we're offering a seminar where some people who truly understand how your local school districts are financed explain it. And out of the commissioner's mouth himself, and I don't want to get in the weeds about arguing about money. I mean, I think it's very clear that you can see that we've got one lane of education, charter schools, another private, and now we're going to expand into, charters, public, and now we're going to expand into the private, and you're going to pay for it. It's going to come out of the general fund, and you fund the general fund. So you're gonna pay for a whole nother lane of education. And then the fourth one over here that they're gonna try to do, wanted to do this session, but doesn't look like they're gonna get it for whatever reasons, timing, is virtual ed. So I'm just telling you that, and it's all gonna be government run, because once the rules of engagement are that you have to get the state voucher, you have to do the state test. And I love that he used 20 years, go back 20 years of private schools. Well, it's been 20 years since the Republicans have been writing laws, No Child Left Behind, ESSA. They've been writing the legislation over and over and over again that are making our schools fail. The STAR test, making our schools fail. They teach to the test instead of teaching how to learn. So when they take that application over to the private school, those private schools are gonna fail as well. And then the financial piece of it, in order to administer this, they are gonna create 5 vendors, which is gonna be 5 businesses, and we're talking just to 1%, to educate 1%, the administrative fees, 5% is gonna be you're talking about $4 million per vendor. $4 million per vendor. You ought to be outraged if they're spending your money this way.
Okay, so thank you both. That's a lot of information. Some of you your head might be spinning with terms they're using that you don't understand. And she's absolutely right. That is designed that way to confuse you. But let's continue to try to dig into it. We're going to open it up to questions. I know anytime we open things up for questions, someone's going to have some long diatribe and no question at the end of it, okay? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to get your question enunciated, and then you can either address it to one of them specifically, or we'll just see who wants to take it. So, any questions? Oh, awesome. If you could speak it loudly, and then I'll repeat it into the mic for the recording.
My name is Patrick Huff, and I just want to issue a question after a quick statement. Yes, we have had Republicans in charge of education for the past 35 years. I'm a Republican. If the schools are broken, if parents are running from the schools, it's because the Republicans broke it. And now they're offering a fix. And the fix is going to go their way. Why can't we concentrate on the 85% of kids that are in the traditional public schools and get it back on track? That's my main beef. We don't need to look for a fix. We need to fix what we've already got.
What we broke.
what they broke, what the Republicans broke.
Okay,
Can you address
first
it?
of all, Mariah, will you come up here so we can follow your timing better? And this clearly is a question for you, Richard. So he is saying, the Republicans broke the system, and now they think they have a solution, but why don't we address the 85% that are gonna still be in this broken system? Did I get that correctly?
You got it correct.
Okay.
Good.
Oh,
Well,
2 minutes.
okay, good. I won't refute that fact that the Republicans broke it, but I think the Democrats played a role into it as well, because I think maybe about 25 years ago, Ann Richards was the governor.
No, you have to go further
And
back,
so she was a Democrat.
further back.
Yeah,
So-
that's
so,
further
but-
back. It's George Bush.
But let's just say it's broke, right? Let's just say it's broken. And last regular session, we put $10 billion more, increase more funding for public education, right? 10 more billion, and then now, after this special session, maybe another 4 billion package there. That's 14 billion. Now, if something is broken, whether the Democrats broke it or the Republicans broke it, somebody ought to think about how to fix it. How to fix it may be opening up opportunities for more options. One of the things that we have seen, and my doctorate is in education, I did my dissertation
Mine too.
on student success. I did my dissertation on student success and decreasing dropout rates and increasing student success. One of the things that we do is, I found in doing this research, was that when you brought in, those states that brought in parent empowerment and educational freedom, when they brought educational freedom in, that created competition, and competition caused innovation. The data will show it, because what ended up happening, the performance went up. If you go look at the data in Florida, the performance in public schools after school choice came in, raised the performance of the public schools, because competition will always, and it will always breed innovation, because if you're selling something, you got a store right here, and that other person got a store right there, school A and school B. If school A has been there, and school B just comes in, and they bring in innovative academic programming, and they're doing very, very well, and students start leaving and going over here to school B, guess what school A is gonna do? They're gonna innovate and make changes in their academic programming.
Okay, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to respond.
I would just say that there are solutions. There are plenty of people that have solutions, but the solutions remove funding from people who are profiting off of the education system
That's
right
correct.
now. And so they don't want those solutions, because it'll, like I said, break the cycle of profiteering for really the elite politicians, and the elite controllers of the politicians. So that's why the solutions are not being implemented, sadly.
Okay, another question. Mark.
Okay, Richard, I agree with you 100%, right? Competition would drive this, all right? I'm all for school choice, I'm all for school competition, okay? That's not what this legislature is putting in front of the Texas taxpayers, all right? What they're putting in front of the Texas taxpayer is you will pay for public education as you always have. You will subsidize private schools, and you will subsidize the homeschoolers. That's what this program is. And telling me, oh, it's just a little bit of money, it's just gonna come from here, we don't need to worry about it, okay? It's just for a few people, right? That's the nose of the camel.
What's your
So-
question?
So what I want you to address is that the legislation, that the argument is about what's in front of us here, and the what's in front of us today, that's being argued in Austin, is that this is going to be a subsidization of both private and the homeschoolers.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Mark, where I look at it as an opportunity, I see it as an opportunity, particularly in those areas where we're having our greatest struggle in terms of academic performance. We're not number one, Texas, we're not number one in academic performance. We're not even in the top 10 among academic performance around the country. As a matter of fact, in the United States, we're no longer number 1 in math, reading, and science. We're number 25. You can guess who number 1 is. Somebody whispered it out in the back of the road, China. And that's because we've gotten away from math, reading, and science, and we've gotten away from what it takes. We have to raise our floor. And I bring a different kind of perspective I can see than probably that's here. I bring a different kind of perspective because I come out of the inner city of Houston. And right now, African Americans in the state of Texas make up 12% of the Texas population and 34% of the prison population. And all of those individuals in there, if you look at go back to Barbara Bush Reed Foundation, 70% of those folks that are incarcerated read at or below a 3rd grade level. So there's a direct correlation between failing education systems and thriving criminal justice systems. And so I have a deeper need to find a reason to fix it. And one of the things that I've met with pastors across the state of Texas and the city of Houston, and more of them they wanted to start their own schools in those communities. In those communities.
You can finish your thought.
They wanted to start those schools in those communities. Some of them even started, but just wasn't able to sustain it based on what they could take in donations. This would be a great opportunity for them to help us to close the school to prison pipeline and open up for kids who may not work in the public school system.
Did that answer your question?
Well, not really, but if I could go through and visit, because before I came to this meeting, I just drove from the 5th Ward. I was at the 5th Ward, we're talking about trying to create quiet zones for the Union Pacific Railroad there. And we just did a film there and everything else.
Okay.
So what I'm asking you, all right, so I have been in the 5th Ward. I've been working with Pastor Morrison, all right? We did Forge for Families, you and I did the Forge for Families in that area. So yes, again, this does not address, this is not a way to solve the problems of the inner city youth. This doesn't address it, and it will not fix the issues there. I don't see how you can tell me that this voucher system, ESA or whatever, is directly gonna impact 5th Ward families and 5th Ward children.
Okay, so Mark is asking, how will this, and again, we're addressing a bill that is on the floor right now, right?
Yes.
I mean, we don't know what else they might come up with, but this current bill that we're addressing, how will it help students or youth in the 5th Ward or places like those?
It would be a game changer. It would be, but see, Mark, you went and visited there. I was born and raised there.
Fair enough.
That's the total difference.
Fair enough.
So it would be a game changer for us.
How?
Because we have churches in our community. We have churches in our community that want to start schools. We can have Christian-based schools in our own communities. You know, I was fortunate, I took my children to the 3rd Ward to St. Mary's over off of Ennis, which is in 3rd Ward. But what about all the pastors in those hot spots in the inner city that want to help but can't do it just on donations? This would allow them, for their congregants, people in their congregation, they want to bring their kids to their school, at their church, they'll be able to do it. That would be a game changer for us in the inner city.
30 seconds.
So I guess my concern with this is that, you know, at the heart of this, what we are experiencing is also a humanitarian issue when 70% of the decade of students that are in school cannot read. It is a humanitarian issue. It's no longer an education issue. And then what I hear being said is that we need to fund the churches. That this is to fund the churches. Well, if you want to fund the churches so they can make a difference in the inner city, I think that's something that they should entertain, but I don't believe it should be entertained as an educational savings account.
Okay, another question.
Oh, okay, so I'm Scott Lowe, I'm her husband, so I'm gonna try to be unbiased on this one. This is a question.
It's gonna be hard, man.
I know.
I've never been able to be unbiased in the room with my wife.
I know, it's like
Go for it.
Do I wanna sleep on the couch tomorrow?
Go
No, I
for
really
it.
don't, I don't understand. So who's gonna monitor all this? So these kids are getting this educational voucher, right? They have access to the money. So first of all, if they don't use it, what happens to the money? Or if they start using it, who's gonna monitor that it's being used specific rules? Who's gonna monitor that? And all of a sudden they break the rules, then all of a sudden, wait, we didn't break the rules, so now they gotta hire a lawyer to fight back for the
Okay,
money?
so his question is,
There's-
how will the
there's
money
The
be
bureaucracy,
monitored?
the bureaucracy is gonna be here, it's gonna be a mess.
Rolled out.
To watch all this, don't we just add more government regulation, we're adding all these
Okay,
eyeballs.
let him answer.
Okay, I don't understand, I don't know.
Well, yeah. I think that, for one, we just have a Senate bill that's left the Senate going to the House, and the bill's gonna change. But, you know, when, just like any other funding, when you bring in the controller, and you bring in TEA, and you bring in the entities, the state agencies, they will provide the monitoring for it. They provide the monitoring right now for public schools. You know, and so it's not like you're gonna be adding in a whole new government, because right now, almost 100% of our money go to public schools, either public charters or public ISDs. And they monitor it well. One of the things is, if you're looking at this ESA program, it's a very small program. We're talking less than 1%. But here's the thing. That 1%, like I was just telling Mark, makes a difference, the difference of daylight and dark in some of our most depressed communities around the state of Texas, particularly in the urban centers. Maybe not in the suburbs, and maybe not in the rural areas, but when you go into those urban centers where it's life or death, it makes all the sense in the world. And it's not funding a church, it's funding a child. Now, if the child's parent wants to take them to a Christian-based learning center or institution, they can do that. Or most of them may do what they've done in other states, just leave them right there in public schools. But the opportunity and the freedom is there to do it. Right now in Texas, we don't have that freedom.
Another question?
I think I believe the school choice, because I believe the market, once the ESA account is let the money for the kid, if you don't want it, you just stay in your neighborhood school, yeah. However, based on the research, if you have the school choice, less than 10% of the family will use it. However, that 10% can help the public school to change and help the superintendent think about that. Oh, if I need to keep the kid, I need to fix up. They need to hear a parent's voice. I follow the bill, SB8 and SB1, and SB1 I can tell you that totally exclude the homeschooler. Yeah, and then so homeschooler will not covered, and then for the test, and then you say the regulation will go to the private school. The student also need to take the STAR test, and also will run the private school. If you read the bill, it say that the bill say that all the private school they need to take the long reference test, and our
What is
STAR
your
test
question?
is the criteria reference test. So my question to you, do you believe that the school choice also can help to public school to fix their quality, and can also to increase the job opportunity for the teachers? Because right now, all the teaching is top down. The teacher need to teach what the upstairs teach. However, if I don't want it, I don't know where to go. However, when the market opens, there's more public school come out, the teacher have more way to go. So my question to you two, do you believe this school choice can help open the market, can help the public school improve their quality, can help the teacher have more choice?
Okay, so her question, it is for both of them, so I will
Mary,
let you,
go first.
I want you both to answer that question. And you can give them 90 seconds. but she wants to know is, will school choice open up the market to have better resources for teachers and testing? I think
Yeah,
that
help the teachers more opportunity, can also help the family, yeah.
the teachers and the families with more.
To pick the, better school, for the kids, yeah. Yeah, the kids can still in the public school, yeah, but, yeah, if you.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't believe that it will change anything that's happening in the public school. It's not going to create competition. And free market enterprise doesn't really happen when it's something that's mandated. In other words, it's mandated, it's part of our Constitution, that every child in the state of Texas have an education. So there's no choice. Every child has to have an education. So that in and of itself disqualifies it from free market. But if you wanted to look at the marketplace and say, does competition help here? No, because charter schools have not moved the needle. And Robin Hood did not change anything. The number one tie to the quality of the school are the government regulations and the socioeconomic of the student. So if you want to solve the problem for the socioeconomic of the student, add welfare. I mean, that's what it is. It is a welfare payment actually for the wealthy people. Very few low-income students are going to actually access this lottery because they're not even going to have, their parents aren't even going to know how to apply for it. I mean, this is the real truth at the local level, working with parents in schools. The parents don't even know how to complain about the fact that they can't see their child's curriculum. So the parent is not going to know how to apply for this lottery. The ones who are going to know how are the higher income, well-educated parents.
Richard, 90 seconds, please.
Yeah, one of the things, Mary's almost correct on Article 7 of the Texas Constitution. Article 7 of the Texas Constitution, it doesn't just say that every child has to have an education. It says that the Texas legislature shall provide a free and efficient education for every child. Efficient. That's the operative term. Some kids in the public system are getting free and efficient educations, and some are not. We can trace that back to certain zip codes. Now, to respond to your question in terms of the free market, absolutely. Anywhere you apply the free market, you're gonna see it. You apply competition, you're gonna see innovation, and you're gonna see what? Productivity go up. And you're gonna see outcomes go up. And you're gonna see them not just go up where they are right now, already up in a lot of private schools. You're gonna see them go up in the public schools. But here's the thing. America is built on free market principles. We're built on freedom. So why are we fighting freedom so hard? That's the main question, lingering on the table, pleading for an answer today is, why are we fighting freedom so hard when it comes to education and making educational decisions for our children, which are the future of our nation?
Another question, please. Art.
Yes, so this is, how do y'all, how do you propose that the 10% of the student population in Texas that is special ed, that is gonna be, it costs more than $8,000 to educate them. How are we gonna protect them from being discriminated with these savings accounts?
That's for me.
It's not for me because I don't believe that.
Let me just say on the mic so we can make sure the question was caught, or if you want to just repeat the question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so he's asking, special ed is way above and beyond an $8,000 bill, and if we're only gonna provide $8,000 in funding, how is there even a chance for that?
No, it is a chance.
Is that
I mean,
basically?
Yeah, it is a chance. I'm telling you the reason why. Because remember I gave you the story about myself, and I had to pay 100% of my high taxes in Spring, Texas over here, and I had to pay 100% over here. As a parent, I did that. What if only 50% of my tax dollars could follow the kid? That would have given me a break. So it doesn't matter what state your child is. Some parents just need help. Most parents will find a way to take care of their children. Most parents. And I also believe most parents will learn how to find opportunities that are presented to them. They'll learn how to fill out the paperwork. I can tell you, I'm the first generation that went to college in my family. There was one lady in my neighborhood that helped mostly everybody fill out their college applications. And everybody in my community knows, go see Ms. Jones, you want to go to college, she's gonna help you fill out your paperwork. Then you go and see Ms. McCoy, she's gonna notarize it for you. Just because you poor, don't think poor folks don't have a network. I have a doctorate degree, but neither of my parents finished high school. They're blue collar workers. So just because you're poor, don't think that they don't love you and they won't go to full length for you to make sure that you excel.
That's beautiful. Okay, I haven't got anybody in the back. Is there anybody back here that wanted to ask a question that I don't really see you, so I'm ignoring you. Okay, well then, actually, you had one, and then we're gonna make your answers really quick on these, okay? So we're gonna do all
Round
three of these
robin.
questions, and you're gonna get 30 seconds to answer. Go ahead.
So there's two big things that I see affecting the schooling right now in this area, all over Texas. One is immigration. It's huge. That's really, that's why you see all these bonds that school districts are coming out with to build new schools for their growth, etc. The other thing is teacher shortage is really severe. So we have immigration, and based on the wave of immigration we're seeing, that's causing or will cause scores to go down. It's more difficult for some of these school districts, if you will, to bring up that level of the new demographics, if you will. in the
Okay,
school
let's
district.
get to the question, please.
And then number two is a teacher shortage, which is huge. So what do you think would be, in terms of whether school choice, no school choice, in terms of the impact on those two things and how the schooling in Texas can best manage those two trends?
Well,
The impact, the
school,
impact.
the immigration, I think, is a separate question that I would have to handle outside of this relative to, the voucher.
But
Second.
it's a huge factor, it's affecting all these schools.
It is, but honestly, they are being educated in their language, and they're not being tracked. How many immigrants we have in the state of Texas, that's not being tracked. How many we have in the school system. The only way to track it is by how many English as second language students you have, and how many students that are taking the STAR test in Spanish. And the students who take the STAR test in Spanish perform quite well. So I would say that that's kind of something that's out there to be seen. And then in regards to the teachers, having the private school sector grow is not going to help teachers, because teachers in charter schools and private schools do not have to be certified. So the only place that you're going to increase teacher is through your public school. You're going to kill teaching. Richard?
Well, right now, I think you're spot dead on that there is a shortage of teachers in public schools, and there's a reason for that. But there is not a shortage of teachers right now. The only group that had an increase in teachers were Catholic schools. Catholic schools gained, matter of fact, they grew in teachers in Catholic schools, and they decreased in teachers in public schools. And that was largely due to a lot of the wokeism that was going on into the public schools. And when they brought a lot of wokeism into public schools, a lot of teachers didn't feel comfortable having to teach those kinds of things. And also the gender issues and the gender identity issues and all those things came into public schools. A lot of the teachers didn't feel comfortable in the public system, so they moved into the Catholics, the private sector along in the Christian-based schools. So you're gonna see a lot of teachers, unless the public schools change and get back to teaching math, reading, science, and arithmetic, and get away from all that wokeism, you're gonna see teachers leaving there and going to other places where they feel comfortable.
Okay, who was, yes, you.
Okay, retired teacher, taught in the 4th Ward, HISD, Houston ISD for many years. So my question is about, you talk about the freedom, and my biggest concern since the 1990s when I heard about, because it's a great marketing, wow, I was like, oh, freedom and choice. It's a great marketing scheme they got. And as you start figuring this out, my question is, the accountability, the governor said there are strings attached. And for private schools, you're going to have to follow, you have to follow accreditation, and which is government ruled and dictated. My kids went to private Christian schools. So I understand the public schools really well. I understand the Christian schools. The strings are what the parents, I wouldn't have a choice. If the government's going to tell my Christian school what they can do and what they can't do, you have no choice.
Okay.
So how do you understand? How do you think there's freedom there?
It's a lot of freedom, man. It's great freedom, being able to be, as a parent, I got 4 kids. It's great freedom to be able to say where you want to take your kid and put your kid in this school or that school, and you have your tax dollars to follow. That's a great opportunity, man. Let me tell you, but private schools also accredit. They have accreditation as well. And so private schools are doing very, very well. Now, there are some public schools that are doing very, very well. The problem here that I see is we make this a public school versus a private school, and it should not be. It's not an either or. Why can't it be a both and? Why is it so that we want to lock this group out? It doesn't make sense to me.
So I think the biggest issue at the end of the day is that you're going to fundamentally change the form of government that we have in the state of Texas. You're going to have a state tax. You're not going to have a local tax. And you're not going to have representation for your taxation. And that's where we are. Once you flip this switch, you will not have any representation. Fundamentally, this is unconstitutional.
Okay, last question, Ryan.
We have freedom in Texas. I am a disabled Jewish mother homeschooling my kids, and I make a lot of sacrifices to do that. I came from a state where when we got school choice, it took away my right to homeschool. How can you guarantee that this doesn't open that door to where we start losing freedoms here in Texas? Because I didn't go through all that to lose it here too.
What state you come from?
Washington. Where I am not qualified to teach my children.
Well, I have a good friend of mine is Virginia Walden in Washington. Virginia is a good friend of mine. And matter of fact, she was one of the pioneers, African-American mother growing up raising her kids in the inner city of Washington, D.C. And I'm so proud of the fact that she was one of the pioneers for school choice and educational freedom. Because one of the things I shared with you, it changed the game for her. And she was a single mom with 2 sons growing up on the streets of D.C. And it changed the game for her kids. Her sons went on to finish high school, join the military, and do very well. I don't see where it's going to lock homeschoolers out. Matter of fact, I'm meeting with folks right now in terms of how we make recommendations to make sure that it's fair for everybody across the board. Educational freedom should be fair for everybody across the board. The bill will allow for homeschooling.
No, we don't want the strings. That's
But I understand that, but then that's your freedom. You can choose to say no. But another mother it may just work well for another mother. But why say, because I don't want it, I don't want her to be free?
Because they're not gonna regulate half
Because-
of us.
I think her question then is, will there be regulations on homeschooling?
Yes.
I think anytime that there's government, there's gonna be some regulations. We'd be false to say that there's not gonna be any regulations, because one of the things is, right now, where we send our schools, the public schools, is highly regulated. And so, what we're looking at is raising the floor and fixing the system at the same time. And will it happen overnight? No. Florida's program has been in place for 20 years. But as the gentleman back there said, you know, the last 40 years, or 30 or 40 years, it's been broken. Let's move forward and try to look at other options to fix our system and open up opportunities and options for all of our citizens.
Okay, we are out of time. So what I'd like to do is you both to give a 1-minute summary, but I'm gonna throw you a curveball, because in your summary, I want you to say, I want school choice, or I want school choice, but if I don't get it, here's my silver lining. I don't want school choice, but if I do get it, here's my silver lining. That's how I want you to end this.
If I do, so if you want us to do the opposite of what we want.
How will you
Go.
How will you cope if you don't get it the way you want it? Because we have both sides in here, and somebody's gonna lose. How do we deal with it?
Gotta have a win-win there. Go ahead.
So, I'm gonna defy you just a little bit. So I have a call to action, and my call to action is to insist that they fix the government education first. No matter what the outcome is, every child matters. Every child matters. I'm a parent advocate. I run an organization where we advocate for children, and we look at it on a one child by one day scenario. So if we make a difference of one person, one child, one family, then we were a hero that day. And that's all that matters. And we will continue one by one by one. I will not trust my government. They have not earned the trust of the public. And I encourage you to make them show that they are trustworthy before you allow them to do something this monumental to the structure of the Constitution, the tax base, and affecting more children and continuing to turn their back on children. They must address the scenario where children are being harmed and not educated. It is a humanitarian crisis.
So I'm gonna say that her silver lining would be, if you lose this battle and we get school choice, we have thousands more activists that are getting engaged.
You never know though, do you? I hope
Okay,
so.
go ahead.
Well, one of the things that you'll never get folk to change if there's a monopoly. If you have a monopoly on something, there is no reason to change because you're on a game in town. And so when you start to bring in a new game in town, you're gonna see that old variable, and in psychology we call it competing variables. But if this is the only variable out here, it's not gonna change because there's no competing variable to make it change. And that's what public education has been for the last 40 years. It hadn't changed because there's nothing to make them change. You tell them to change, they say, so what? What are you gonna do? You're still gonna send the kids to me, my budget is not gonna change. And so with competition, that's gonna breed change, that's gonna breed innovation and breed growth. Now, if school choice does not pass the way that I would like for it to pass, I am going to ask the governor to bring it back. But you know, I'm an educator. I'm an educator by trade. I'm going to continue to work with public schools. I'm going to continue to work with charter schools. I'm going to continue to work with every educational technique, because there's more than one way to educate people. You mentioned special ed students. There's more than one way to educate people. And so if we look at that, there's more than one option. Let's give ourselves the freedom to choose the right option for our children, number one.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that no matter what happens, we all have to stay engaged. We all have to stay involved and aware of what's going on in education. And maybe we wouldn't have been in this trouble in the first place if people were paying attention. So would you please thank for questions? Maybe you can hang out if you want.
I can hang out, yeah, I got some business.